Why does the Trump administration, not yet in office, believe they can end the war in Ukraine in the coming months? Will Trump pull off this miracle? Whose side will he take, Ukraine or Russia? We discuss live on the YouTube channel 24th. Sorry for the wait. Thanks for waiting. We have with us Rashkin, a U.S. public figure and lawmaker from Rock County, Wisconsin, and Epstein, executive director of the Renew Democracy Initiative. Friends, hello. Why does Kellogg, the future special envoy for Ukraine and Russia, believe Trump is the only one who can end the war in Ukraine? He believes he has the power to change a lot of things in the coming months. Yuri, what is Kellogg's confidence based on? I think the opposite is true here. Donald Trump chose Keith Kellogg because Keith Kellogg has confidence in Donald Trump and his ability to be the only person who can solve any problem put in front of him. Thus, they have the same interests. Keith Kellogg is therefore a spokesman for Donald Trump, and the plan he proposes can obviously get an easier, albeit grudgingly simple, approval from Ukraine. There is no indication yet that Moscow is interested in this arrangement, given what we hear from Western sources. Perhaps when we talk about the Trump administration and the Putin administration, we can see certain historical parallels with the agreements of Hitler and Stalin, when there were non-aggression agreements and agreements to divide spheres of influence and the world. That's what Putin wants now. And Trump probably wouldn't mind an agreement either. So he could then solve his personal problems in that space until someone attacks someone else. So Kellogg here is the first stepping stone that will be set aside, because the issue in this situation is not the future of Ukraine, it's about stopping aid to Ukraine. Trump can easily accomplish this, which we're already seeing. And how to influence Putin? Here, apart from common interests, it is difficult to negotiate. With weapons flowing into Ukraine, and Trump being unhappy about it, Ukraine could simply return the weapons and say, "Sorry, take them back, America." Whatever Trump decides is best for everyone, but that's unrealistic. How unrealistic is it that aid will continue? It's possible, Trump says, that there will be no cuts. Times Magazine recognized Trump as Man of the Year, the second time that's happened. Trump said that long-range projectiles are somehow not to his liking, that the U.S. is hitting Russian territory with long-range weapons. But he noted that he is not going to cut aid to Ukraine. Is it possible that if Putin boorishly turns his nose up at the initiatives proposed by Trump, Kellogg and their ilk, aid to Ukraine will continue, albeit not in an avalanche, but not in such a minimal format as to let Ukraine lose to Russia? It's going to be seen. I want to start with your first question. Have you ever seen anyone around Trump be less than confident that he can accomplish anything? This is Trump. That's an exaggeration. And everyone around him is like that. I don't really believe those words. I look at what these people are doing and what Trump is doing. There are some accomplishments. For example, in the Middle East, he did reach agreements where he was able to more or less help organize peace between Israel and some Arab countries. The situation here is no better and no easier. I have no confidence that he or his team has any plan to promote peace. Among Republicans in the Senate, even people like Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio on his team, they may be willing to attack Biden. They're saying that what Biden was letting hit on Russia is wrong, that it's an escalation or something similar. But that's just trying to find any reason to criticize Biden. You don't want to get too much into what they're saying because they're just attacking Biden on anything. That's their method. We have to look at their ideology and how they see this conflict as a whole. The key question is, who's going to have the real power in this administration? If it's Marco Rubio or Mike Waltz, there will be problems, sure. But that doesn't mean that arms shipments will stop completely. And if the real power goes to J.D. Vance or Tulsi Gabbard, then things could change very quickly. Yuri, will Trump listen to strong players if they influence him? Rubio, Waltz we like too. Maybe we are getting our hopes up too high, but will he listen or act on his own? And then there's Elon Musk, we forgot. Maybe he'll have an impact on something too. We can't hear Yuri right now. 1 second. Yuri, is that Elon Musk already affecting, I guess? No, it hasn't. Yuri, please. The problem is that the strings of power go to the Kremlin. Or we're talking about Elon Musk. Where does he get his guidance from? Okay, we get it with Donald Trump. We guess he is successful, and that means good relations with Vladimir Putin. And then I have a question. The contradiction I see in what Uriel says. On the one hand, there are reasonable people, relatively speaking. Marco Rubio, Waltz is a good last name. But on the other hand, influence. How can there be influence if Trump has to have people around him constantly telling him how great he is? He has a plan, stop aid to Ukraine. And Ukraine can negotiate with Putin after that. Ivanka Trump posted a picture of the Russian tricolor on Twitter and wrote, "We stand with Russia." So the priorities here are clear. Marco Rubio was taken out of the Senate, a very smart move. Now from Florida, Laura Trump can be a senator and Rubio will either follow instructions or he will be fired. They will put their own loyalists in his place. And when it's just their own people there, I don't think there will be a big change in administration. As long as there is Waltz, who is controversial and says something good about Ukraine. I have a question. When did Ivanka Trump display the Russian flag? On Twitter, was it 2-3 days ago? She tweeted out a Russian flag and added, "We stand with Russia." I'll look into it, but that's really weird. I may be wrong, but prove it to me. I'm checking now. So far, I don't see that. That said, how do you equate the contradictions between people who support Trump on everything and those who should contradict him by supporting Ukraine? After all, it is not Ivanka Trump and Trump Jr. who will be making foreign policy decisions and determining the choices of Trump and his entourage. It's not going to be up to them to decide that. It will be determined by the more powerful people in the Trump administration. I believe it's a family business that has now come into power, and they have the same priorities. They are picking people who will express their priorities, because politics is about people. They will recruit a team that matches their goals. If it's Ivanka Trump, who Trump says will be a great spokeswoman for in the future, she's doing family stuff right now. I think they are keeping in the right family direction. He has a niece who has criticized him for a long time. We'll see what happens next. There should be a clear overlap of interests. Donald Jr. says some things, even though he is not a member of the administration, but is an influential person backed by connections and family. To underestimate their public statements is to their own detriment. Uriel, do they really show this position of Trump? Why would it be to his advantage or his goal to cut aid completely or remove it, as Yuri says? Because there are options for Lend-Lease, there are options to pose, there are options that the more weapons that are produced, sold, bought by the U.S. defense industrial complex, that's jobs and money to the coffers of the United States of America. I don't see Trump hating us so much. He met with Zelensky. Trump's logic can't always be understood. I will say what I agree with, that Trump's family plays a key role. They may not even be in the administration. Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka, they play an important role. But they're not the only ones. And Trump likes competition. He likes his advisors to outdo each other. He most often listens to the last person he talks to. That's why it's so important to be last with Trump, to be the last one in the room. Trump doesn't always think strategically. He just listens to the last person. That's what he's doing, and that means we need to be very careful with the information. These things happen. Trump and his family do a lot of unproven things, so we have to verify each one so we don't lose credibility if it turns out it didn't happen. They do a lot of terrible things. We don't need to make up anything. What, in reality, is Trump going to do about Ukraine? It's very hard to figure out. The most important thing is for Zelensky and everyone else to say how smart Trump is, what a genius he is, so that history will remember him as the strongest American president. He helps protect American interests against a Russian dictator. Again, we need to use Trumpian language to talk to him. Traditionally, we talk about the defense of Ukraine, that we need to defend freedom, the free world, against dictatorship, against authoritarianism. Ukrainians are a people who defend their families and their land. These arguments will not work with Trump. You have to talk to him from the point of view of, first of all, American interests, and secondly, and I think this is even more important, his personal interests, his personal ego. All arguments should always be presented using Trumpian language. This means we have to change our vocabulary. We have to use Trump's language and influence his administration and the people around him. It will be difficult, but to say that we can't do anything and that Trump will give everything to Putin is unproductive and untrue. There are opportunities, and we've seen that. We've seen Trump's change of heart toward North Korea. Unfortunately, in the wrong direction when he decided Kim was his friend. But that means he can change in the opposite direction as well. Moreover, I want to ask, Elon Musk is a serious problem. But for how long we think that Trump and Elon Musk will be the closest of friends? These are two people who think they are the smartest people in the world. They are the best people in the world. How long before they're fighting with each other, before one of them says something and insults the other? Once that happens, I think we'll see how that influence can absolutely change. I think Ukrainians and your diplomats in America should be prepared for that. Moreover, they have to change their strategy. Your diplomats have to realize that the Republicans control Washington. You have to change the relationship with the people. To date, I don't see that happening. I hope that your government will now start working on this, because you need to advance relations with Mike Johnson, with Trump, with the new Senate leader, Senator Toon, and so on. That's the key work of Ukrainian diplomacy. Uriel agrees with you and marks the beginning of a process that the New York Times is reporting on. Media reports that Ukrainian officials are trying to sway Trump to their side in the war with Russia. It's about the visit. Ukrainian businessmen are playing up Trump's practical approach, emphasizing Ukraine's wealth of natural resources that can support U.S. industries. This is a war about money. Trump will make a deal to get our money back and enrich himself with rare earth minerals. It's a good deal for Ukraine that will bring peace, as the New York Times notes, citing Senator Lindsey Graham, a friend of Ukraine. After Trump's victory, Zelensky changed his stance, saying that Ukraine is ready for negotiations, including concessions, such as temporary loss of territories with the possibility of their return. This strategy demonstrates Zelensky's reasonableness, especially against the backdrop of nuclear threats as well as blackmail by Putin. Yuri, do you see our rhetoric changing? How much does it look like we're ready for a fair negotiation and Russia is against it? It seems to me that they are happy with this image. As for diplomacy, it makes no sense for Ukraine to talk about the 1991 borders, because now America has a different president. Trump won the election. I agree with Uriel. We should talk to Republicans in their language, so even the word Democrat values is outdated. Now we have to talk about American values. It's the same thing, but the language has changed. The America of capitalism. I used to think Biden would do what needed to be done, but now I think I don't see how you can change Trump's mind about negotiating with Putin, doing as Putin wants. to support Ukraine and find something positive in it for himself. I'll be very happy if it can somehow happen. But what it looked like before the election was that Trump would come in, end aid to Ukraine, and after that, Putin would continue. What happens next is up to Ukraine and Europe. And here we continue to be in this state. We need to negotiate. We need to continue to conduct diplomacy. I'll make an example. Here's Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson has been reassured. About a year ago, he was still absolutely opposed to continuing to give aid. But I remind you, we waited 6 months in Congress for Republicans to move the aid forward until Mike Johnson finally changed his mind and decided to move this forward. How did he change his mind and why? Because it was explained to him using his language, his logic, to explain that Ukraine is not torturing Christians. On the contrary, Ukraine is protecting Christians, that Russia is torturing, that Russia is attacking. When Russia attacks, or Donald Trump was persuaded that it needed to be resolved in front of him, and he gave his authorization, his blessing, that Mike Johnson gave his consent, what I'm hearing here in Washington is that, again, I don't know what conversations there have been between Johnson and Trump. I will frankly say that I don't know that, but I do know that the conversation in Washington is that Mike Johnson was met with people who were talking about religion in Ukraine, that Russia was attacking Christians and Ukraine was protecting them. And that was a key argument for Johnson. That's what I heard in Washington. How much of it is true and how influential it is, I don't know. I think it had an impact. Now you have to realize that you can influence Trump and use that. Here I will give an example. I now think Pinchuk, one of your most important businessmen, should talk to Trump. Your other such billionaires and important businessmen can influence Trump. I see a difference between the way Zelensky talks about America and the future of this war and the way he used to talk. But so far, I'll be honest, I don't see a difference in the embassy. It's very interesting that I can see the difference from Kiev, but I can't see the difference from Washington, D.C. And that means your embassy here has to change. And that, of course, is a huge problem. That's when Mike Johnson, even though he changed his mind and started supporting you, when he came out against your embassy here in the U.S., that's a very difficult thing. We've got to change that. We've got to come up with a method. Again, it may not be fair. It may not be right, what Mike Johnson is saying. That's the whole thing. And Xi Jinping's attitude toward Trump, as if Trump would call him to the inauguration, even though it's not customary to call the president at all, but Xi Jinping will go. At the same time, he hosted Medvedev. Yuri, what do you see now from the position of Canada, Mexico? This is more likely now under President Trump, although it was not discussed under candidate Trump. When there was a tariff war in the beginning, and now we invite you to the inauguration, a lot of things change after the election. Uriel, what do you think of this invitation? I doubt that Trump, despite his assignments, will be able to find common ground with dictators, not just confrontation or competition. We're looking at different options because we can't predict behavior. The fact that Trump invited Xi to his inauguration is a unique thing. Biden didn't invite him, and even in 2016, Trump didn't invite him, and no president has ever done that. The interesting question is, why did he do it? I've heard arguments that Trump is willing to give something positive to Xi, after all, so that he can then influence him more, attack him more, etc. Saying to Xi Jinping, if you behave well, we'll do good things to you, and if you behave badly, we'll do negative things, of course. That's one possibility, perhaps. On the other hand, what Yuri was saying is also possible. Trump has a common language with dictators, he respects them, and we've seen that historically. We saw Trump say during the campaign that Xi Jinping is an absolute genius because he controls 1.5 billion people. And that's just it. I think he's a little bit even jealous of him. Why can't he control Americans the way Xi Jinping controls the Chinese? There may be some sympathy here. That's on the one hand, and on the other hand, we certainly see Trump's rhetoric and his campaign rhetoric against China, that they believe that the main enemy is not Russia, but China. It's not clear where it's going to end up. I think we're going to see a lot of this where on one side he's attacking China, saying something negative, and on the other side he's doing something positive. Just as Trump said that these dictators aren't as big an enemy of America as the ones inside the country, so this speaks to his direction for the future. Yuri is right. It's hard to know what these words mean. We see Trump saying one thing, doing another, and then saying another again. It's hard to predict these things. The message here is things can change. We can't say that Trump will be friends with Xi or that he will be an absolute enemy of Xi. We'll see him do one thing, look at the reactions, and then do something else. Most importantly, he doesn't have a strategy that doesn't change. He has tactics. Just like Putin has tactics. He will try tactics and look at the reactions. We'll be responding to the changes and thinking about how to work with it. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you in a week. Have a good day. Yuri Rashkin and Epstein.